I sat on the hard wooden bench, watching my sister weep into a lace handkerchief that cost more than my rent. Vivian told the judge I was unstable, a risk to our father's legacy, and for a moment, I almost believed her. I was ready to surrender, to let her take the millions just to escape the humiliation. Then the courtroom doors swung open, and a stranger in a black suit stepped inside, carrying the secret that would burn our family name to the ground. The phone call that ended my life as I knew it came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was raining in Seattle, a gray, relentless drizzle that matched the spreadsheet open on my monitor. I was 33 years old, an actuary for a mid-sized insurance firm, and I liked my life. I liked that my rent was paid on time. I liked that my car was a Honda Civic with 100,000 miles on it and not a scratch. I liked that when I bought a coffee, I used my own money, earned by my own hours. When the caller ID flashed Morgan Estate, I let it ring twice. My father never called. My sister, Vivian, only called if she needed a character witness or a donor for a charity gala she was chairing. I picked up on the third ring. Eliana, the voice said. It was not my father. It was Harold Wexley, the family attorney. I am afraid I have bad news. I did not scream. I did not drop the phone. I just sat very still as Harold explained that Graham Morgan, my father, had suffered a massive cardiac event in his study 2 hours ago. He was gone before the paramedics arrived. I understand. I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from a different room. We need you in Alderbrook. Eliana, Harold said. The funeral is being arranged. Vivian is distraught. She needs her sister. I almost laughed at that. Vivian did not need me. Vivian needed an audience. I hung up the phone, saved my spreadsheet, and walked to my manager's office to request bereavement leave. I drove home in the rain, packed a black suit I had not worn in 4 years, and started the 3-hour drive south to Alderbrook. Alderbrook was not just a city, it was a tax bracket. It was a place where driveways had names and the air smelled of manicured boxwood and old money. As I crossed the city limits, the tension started at the base of my neck. I was the second daughter, the quiet one, the one who went to a state university instead of the Ivy League, the one who moved away to work for a salary while Vivian stayed to manage the social calendar and the unspoken expectations of the Morgan dynasty. I pulled up to the iron gates of the estate. They swung open slowly, admitting me into the world I thought I had escaped. The house loomed ahead, a sprawling brick mansion that always felt more like a museum than a home. Vivian was waiting in the foyer. She looked immaculate. She was wearing a black dress that fit her slender frame perfectly, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her makeup was flawless. Eliana, she whispered. She pulled me into a hug that felt like being embraced by a statue. You are finally here. I am so sorry. Viv, I said, patting her back awkwardly. It has been a nightmare, she said, pulling away. She looked at my shoes, then my hair. I could feel the assessment. I was the frantic, messy sister arriving from the city. She was the grieving queen. The board members have been calling nonstop. The press is already at the gate. I have had to handle everything. I can help now, I said. She gave me a sad, tight smile. Oh, sweetie, you just rest. You look exhausted. I do not want you to break down. You know how you get. There it was, the first seed, how I get. The next 3 days were a blur of floral arrangements and hushed conversations. The memorial service was held at the St. Jude Cathedral. It was standing room only. The mayor was there. 2 senators were there. Half the board of the Morgan Group was there. I sat in the front pew, next to Vivian. I cried because I missed my father, complicated as he was. He had been distant, stern, and often cold, but he was my father. Vivian cried too, but her tears seemed timed to the hymns. During the reception at the house, I stood by the fireplace with a glass of lukewarm water. Watching the room, Vivian was holding court near the window. I could hear snippets of her conversation with Mrs. Calloway, the head of the local garden club. It is so hard, Vivian was saying. her voice pitched low but carrying perfectly. "Eliana is taking it very badly. She has always been so fragile. I am worried about her stability. We are just trying to keep her calm." Mrs. Calloway glanced at me with pity. I straightened my spine, but the damage was done, to them. I was the unstable little sister, the flight risk, the liability. Vivian was rewriting the narrative before the body was even cold. The reading of the will took place the morning after the funeral. Harold Wexley's office was in downtown Alderbrook, a space of mahogany paneling and leather chairs that smelled of cigars and judgment. Vivian sat on one side of the large conference table. I sat on the other. Harold sat at the head, shuffling papers with trembling hands. He looked older than I remembered. His skin was gray, and he kept licking his lips. "Shall we begin?" Harold said. Vivian crossed her legs. "Just read it. Harold, we all know the structure. Everything to the trust. Managed by me, with a stipend for Eliana. Let us get this over with." Harold cleared his throat. He did not look at Vivian. "Actually," he said, "that is not the current draft." Vivian went still. "Excuse me," she said. "Your father updated his will 6 months ago." Harold said. He began to read. The preamble was standard. The charitable donations were standard. Then came the division of the estate. "To my daughter, Vivian Morgan, I bequeath 50% of the liquid assets and the primary residence at Alderbrook. To my daughter, Eliana Morgan, I bequeath 50% of the liquid assets." Vivian's eyes narrowed. 50-50. That was unexpected. She had anticipated 80-20, but she stayed quiet. "However," Harold continued, his voice wavering slightly, "regarding the shares in the private holding company known as Moorcorp Limited and the property located at Lake Bennett, I hereby place these assets into a temporary trust. The sole decision-making power regarding the disposition, sale, or management of these specific assets is granted to Eliana Morgan for a period of 1 year." The room went silent. The silence was heavy. Physical. "What did you say?" Vivian asked. Her voice was ice. "Eliana has the controlling interest in Moorcorp and the lake house," Harold said. He refused to make eye contact with her. For 1 year. After that, it reverts to a joint tenancy. But for the next 12 months, she has the final vote. Vivian stood up. "That is impossible. Daddy would never do that. Moorcorp holds the family's legacy investments. Eliana does not know a stock from a bond. She is an actuary. For God's sake, she counts beans. She does not manage empires. It is in the will." "Vivian," Harold said softly, "it is ironclad." Vivian turned to me. Her face was a mask of fury, but she smoothed it over instantly. She sat back down. She smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "Well," she said, "that is certainly a surprise. Daddy must have been confused near the end. We will sort it out." The meeting ended abruptly. I walked out of the office feeling dizzy. I did not want to run a holding company. I did not want the lake house. I just wanted to go back to Seattle. As I was waiting for the elevator, a man approached me. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car. He had a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Ms. Morgan," he said, "I am Marcus Thorne. I am representing your sister's interests through Marrow and Vale LLP. I know the firm." I said, "They were the sharks of Alderbrook. High fees, low morals. I wanted to offer my condolences," he said, "and to offer a solution." "A solution to what?" I asked. "This situation with the will." Thorne said. He stepped closer. He smelled of expensive cologne and peppermint. "Look, Eliana. Can I call you Eliana? You have a life in Seattle, a job, friends. You do not want to get bogged down in the minutiae of estate management here. It is messy. It is public. What are you suggesting?" I asked. "A settlement," he said. "Vivian is willing to buy out your share of the estate right now. A lump sum, $2 million, cash. You sign over the decision rights to Moorcorp and the lake house, and you walk away. No probate, no court battles, no humiliation." "Humiliation," I repeated. "Why would there be humiliation?" Thorne sighed, as if explaining gravity to a child. Probate is a public process. Eliana, if this goes to court, things come out, medical records, psychological history. Vivian wants to protect you from that. She loves you. She does not want your struggles to become public record. My struggles, I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking in my pockets. We know you have had a hard time, Thorne said gently. The stress of the city, the distance from the family. Take the money. Eliana, go back to your life. Let the grown-ups handle the business. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. I will think about it, I said. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, I saw Thorne's smile vanish. He pulled out his phone before I was even out of sight. I did not go back to the estate immediately. I waited in the lobby until I saw Vivian and Thorne leave. Then I went back up to Harold Wexley's office. The receptionist tried to stop me, but I walked past her. Harold was in his office, pouring a glass of scotch. His hands were shaking so badly the bottle clicked against the glass. Harold, I said. He jumped, spilling the amber liquid on his desk. Eliana, you should not be here. Why are you scared? Harold, I asked. I am not scared, he said. He grabbed a napkin and dabbed at the spill. I am grieving. Graham was my friend. You read that will like you were reading a hostage note. I said, why did Dad give me control of MoreCorp? What is in that holding company? Nothing. Harold said too quickly. Just old assets, stocks, bonds, boring things. Then why did Vivian offer me $2 million to walk away 5 minutes after the reading? I asked. Harold froze. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide, watery, and terrified. She offered a settlement. He whispered, yes, take it. Harold said. He came around the desk. He gripped my arm. His fingers were cold. Eliana, listen to me. I have known you since you were a baby. Take the money. Go back to Seattle. Do not come back to Alderbrook. Harold, you are hurting me. I said, do not poke at old paperwork. Eliana, he hissed. Probate will be messy, dirtier than you can imagine. Just let her have it. Let her have what? I asked. Everything, Harold said. He let go of my arm and stepped back. Just go, please, before she knows we are talking. I left Harold's office with a cold knot in my stomach. I drove back to the estate, the rain hammering against the windshield. The house was quiet when I arrived. Vivian's car was in the drive, but I did not see her. I went straight to my father's study on the ground floor. I needed to feel close to him. I needed to understand why he had done this. The study smelled of leather and pipe tobacco. It was exactly as he had left it, or so I thought. I sat in his heavy oak chair. I opened the center drawer. It was empty, not just tidy, but empty. No pens, no paper clips, no dust. I opened the side drawers. They were organized, but they felt sterile. The clutter of a life, the receipts, the notes, the half-finished letters was gone. I looked at the hanging files in the bottom drawer. They were labeled neatly: taxes, property, insurance. I pulled out the file for Lake Bennett. It was thin, just a deed and a tax assessment. I reached into the back of the drawer, feeling along the metal rail. My finger brushed against something sticky. I pulled my hand back. There, on the metal divider, was a rectangular patch of adhesive residue. A label had been peeled off. Recently, the glue was still tacky. I looked closer. I could see the faint impression of letters in the residue, where someone had pressed hard with a pen on the label that used to be there. I squinted. It looked like North. Eliana. I spun around. Vivian was standing in the doorway. She had changed into casual clothes, cashmere and silk. She held a glass of white wine. What are you doing in here? She asked. I was looking for a pen. I lied. There are no pens in there, she said. I had the staff clean the office this morning. Daddy was so messy near the end. I wanted to archive his papers properly. You cleaned it fast. I said, efficiency is a virtue. Eliana, you would know that if you had ever managed anything more complex than a checking account. She walked into the room and sat on the edge of the desk. She looked down at me. "Did Marcus speak to you?" she asked. "He did." I said, "He offered me a bribe to leave." "It is not a bribe," she said. "It is a lifeline. $2 million is a lot of money for someone like you." "Someone like me?" I repeated. "You mean someone who works for a living?" "I mean someone who is clearly overwhelmed," Vivian said. Her voice dropped, becoming soft, dangerous. "Eliana, be realistic. You do not belong here. You never did. You were always the quiet one, the soft one. You do not have the stomach for this business. And you do." I asked. "I built this family name," she said. "I managed Daddy's life for the last 10 years while you were playing house in Seattle. I hosted the dinners. I charmed the investors. I kept the secrets. You do not deserve to walk in here and take half of it just because your last name is Morgan. So you admit it." I said, "You think I do not deserve the inheritance. I think you are a liability," she said coldly. "And if you try to fight me on this, I will prove it." "Prove what?" I asked. "That you are unstable," she said. "That you influenced Daddy when his mind was failing. That you are emotionally unfit to manage the estate. I have the diaries. Eliana, I have the emails you sent when you were depressed in college. I can paint a picture of you that will make any judge in this county grant me executorship before you can blink." I stared at her. This was my sister. We had shared a room when we were children. "You would do that to me?" I asked. "I will do whatever is necessary to protect this family," she said. "Take the money. Eliana, leave town, or I will destroy you." I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to walk past her. "I am not signing anything," I said. Vivian took a sip of her wine. She did not turn around. "Then you are making a terrible mistake. I slept in a hotel that night. I could not stay in that house. I locked the door and put a chair under the handle." I felt paranoid, but Harold's fear and Vivian's threat had rattled me to my core. The next morning, I went to the county courthouse. I needed to see what was happening. If Vivian was bluffing, the clerk was a young woman with bright red glasses. She recognized the name Morgan. Everyone in Alderbrook did. "I would like to see the probate filings for Graham Morgan," I said. She typed on her keyboard. "Oh, yes. The emergency petition was granted yesterday." I froze. "What petition?" "The petition for temporary special administration," the clerk said, "filed by Vivian Morgan. She claimed that the other heir that would be you, I guess, was unavailable and legally incapacitated due to distress. The judge signed an emergency order giving her temporary control of all assets. Pending a hearing next week, incapacitated, unavailable." She had filed it the morning of the funeral, while I was crying in the pew next to her. Her lawyers were filing paperwork saying I was crazy. I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It was not sadness. It was not fear. It was a cold, hard clarity. A switch flipped. I had spent my whole life trying to be small, trying not to cause trouble, trying to be the good sister, and it had gotten me nothing but contempt. "Thank you," I told the clerk. "Can I get a copy of that?" I took the paperwork and walked out of the courthouse. I sat on a bench in the square and Googled probate attorneys Alderbrook. I skipped the big firms. I skipped the ones with marble columns on their websites. I looked for the ones with one-star reviews from people complaining that the lawyer was too aggressive or rude. I found a name, Tessa Caldwell. Her office was in a strip mall near the highway, next to a dry cleaner. I drove there immediately. The office was small, cluttered with boxes, and smelled of stale coffee. Tessa Caldwell was a woman in her 40s with messy brown hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She was wearing a blazer over a t-shirt. "Eliana Morgan," she said, looking at my ID. "The quiet sister. You know who I am." I said, "Honey, everyone knows the Morgans." Tessa said, "And everyone knows Marrow and Vale represents your sister. If you are here, it means they are trying to screw you." I put the emergency petition on her desk. "They already have," I said. Tessa picked up the document. She scanned it quickly. She let out a low whistle. "This is aggressive," she said. "Claiming incapacitation without a medical affidavit. They are banking on you being too scared to fight back. They want to steamroll you before you even hire counsel. Can we stop them? I asked. Tessa looked at me. Do you want to stop them? Or do you want to get a slightly better settlement and go home? Because if you want to fight Marrow and Vale, you need to be ready for war. They will dig up your trash. They will interview your ex-boyfriends. They will make you look like a monster. I thought about Vivian's face in the study. I thought about the empty drawer. I thought about the fear in Harold Wexley's eyes. I do not care about the money. I said, I care that they are lying, and I care that my father wanted me to see something in that holding company. And they are terrified I will find it. Tessa grinned. It was a wolfish grin. Okay then, she said. I take a retainer, and I charge for copies. She flipped through the petition again. You know what is weird? She said. What? I asked. This paperwork, she said. It is too perfect. The citations, the exhibits. This was not drafted in the 24 hours after your father died. This was drafted weeks ago, maybe months. They were planning this. I said, they were waiting for him to die. Tessa corrected, and they were ready to pounce the second his heart stopped. She looked at me. What is in that estate, Eliana? What are they hiding? I do not know. I said, but I'm going to find out. I spent the rest of the day at Tessa's office, signing affidavits and drafting a counter-petition. By the time I left, it was dark. I drove back to the hotel. I was exhausted, but my mind was racing. I felt a strange sense of purpose. For the first time in my life, I was not just letting things happen to me, I was pushing back. The front desk clerk called out to me as I walked toward the elevator. Ms. Morgan, he said, someone left an envelope for you. He handed me a plain white envelope. There was no stamp. No return address, just my name. Typed in simple black ink, I took it to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy. It looked old. The title at the top read, Confidential Addendum to Settlement Agreement. The date was from 20 years ago. The rest of the page was a sea of black ink. Almost every line had been redacted. Thick, heavy black bars covered the names, the amounts, and the details. Only a few phrases were visible. Structure of North Pine Community Foundation. Silence provisions regarding the incident. Beneficiary oversight. I turned the paper over. There was a note typed on the back. If you want the truth, don't trust the family lawyer. I stared at the paper. North Pine. The word matched the letters I had seen in the residue in my father's drawer. North. My hands started to shake. This was not just a probate fight. This was not just about who got the lake house. Someone had been watching me. Someone knew I was asking questions, and someone wanted me to know that the danger was older and deeper than I could imagine. I looked at the blacked-out lines again. Silence provisions. The incident. What had my father done, and who was willing to destroy me to keep it buried? I picked up my phone and dialed Tessa. You are not going to believe this, I said. I looked out the window at the rain-slicked streets of Alderbrook. Somewhere out there, in the dark, the game had just changed. I wasn't just fighting for an inheritance anymore. I was hunting a ghost. The fluorescent lights in Tessa Caldwell's office hummed with a low, irritating buzz that seemed to vibrate inside my skull. It was 10 o'clock at night, and the rain was still hammering against the strip mall window pane, turning the neon sign of the dry cleaner next door into a smeared blur of pink and blue. Tessa sat across from me, the single page of the photocopied document lying between us like a weapon. This is not standard probate language, Tessa said. She rubbed her eyes, smearing a bit of mascara. I looked at the redacted lines again. The black bars were thick and impenetrable, swallowing entire paragraphs of text. Only the fragments remained, taunting us. Confidential addendum, silence provisions, foundation oversight structure. What does it mean? I asked. It means your father's will is not just a will, Tessa said. She tapped the paper with a pen. Wills are public documents. Eliana, they distribute assets. They do not contain silence provisions. Silence provisions are for settlement agreements. They are for non-disclosure agreements. They are for burying things. She leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking, and this reference to a foundation oversight structure. She continued, "That is the strangest part. Foundations are usually beneficiaries, not supervisors. This implies that some entity has the power to oversee the distribution of the estate based on compliance with these silence rules." Compliance. I repeated, "Exactly." Tessa said, "It suggests that if you or Vivian say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, the money stops. Or worse." She looked at the sticky note again. "If you want the truth, don't trust the family lawyer, Harold Wexley." I said, "He knows what this is. He has to." Tessa said, "If he drafted the will, he drafted the reference to this addendum, but he did not file this with the court. He kept it off the docket. That is highly unethical. Eliana, if we can prove he suppressed a material part of the testamentary documents, we can have him disbarred." "I do not want him disbarred," I said, standing up and pacing the small room. "I want him to tell me what my father was hiding." I went to see Harold the next morning. I did not make an appointment. I walked past his receptionist, a young woman who looked too intimidated to stop me, and pushed open the heavy oak door to his office. Harold was standing by the window, staring out at the gray skyline of Alderbrook. When he turned, I saw the jump in his chest, the way his hand instinctively went to his tie. "Eliana," he said. His voice was tight. "I was not expecting you." I walked over to his desk and placed the photocopy of the redacted page in the center of the blotter. "I received some mail." "Harold," I said, "I thought you could explain it to me." Harold looked down. He did not touch the paper. He stared at it for a long time, his face draining of what little color it had. He looked like a man who had been waiting for a bomb to go off, only to find it sitting on his desk wrapped in plain paper. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "Does it matter?" I asked. "Is it real?" Harold sat down heavily. He reached for the teapot on his side table and poured a cup. The china rattled loudly against the saucer. Clink, clink, clink. It was the sound of pure nerves. "It is a draft," he said, not looking at me. "An old draft. It has no legal standing." "Then why does it mention silence provisions?" I asked. "Why does it mention a foundation oversight structure? And why did you tell me not to poke at old paperwork?" "Eliana, please," he said. He took a sip of tea, his hand trembling so much he had to use both hands to steady the cup. "There are protected documents. There are client privileges that extend beyond death. I cannot discuss this. You are my lawyer too." "Harold," I said, "or you are supposed to be. You are the executor. You have a duty to me. I have a duty to the estate." He snapped. Then he flinched, as if he had spoken too loudly. He lowered his voice. "I have a duty to keep the estate safe, to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" I demanded. He looked at the door, then back at me. His eyes were wide and pleading. "You do not understand the mechanics of this town," he said. "You have been away too long. There are agreements. Eliana, old agreements. Your father was a brilliant man, but he was in a difficult position. He made choices to protect the family name, to protect Vivian." I said, "To protect all of you." Harold said. He stood up again, his movements jerky. "I cannot help you with this document," he said. "It does not exist in the official file. If you try to introduce it in court, Marrow and Vale will crush you. They will argue it is a forgery. They will argue it is privileged. They will bury you in motions until you are bankrupt." He walked around the desk and stood in front of me. He smelled of fear, a mix of stale sweat and peppermint breath mints. "Take the settlement, Eliana," he said softly. "I am begging you, as your father's friend. Take the money and go back to Seattle. Forget you ever saw this paper." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw a man who was not just being cautious. He was terrified. He wasn't afraid of losing a court case. He was afraid of something else entirely. "Who are you afraid of?" "Harold." I asked. He stepped back. "I think you should leave," he said. I left his office. But I took the paper with me. Harold didn't try to stop me. He just stood there, gripping his teacup, watching me go like I was walking off a cliff. When I got back to my hotel, I opened my laptop. I needed to check the world outside the legal bubble. I logged onto the local social media feeds for Alderbrook. Vivian had been busy. She had posted a photo on Instagram. It was a black and white picture of her and our father from years ago, both of them laughing at a gala. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive framing. Heartbroken to lose my guiding light. Daddy built this family with strength and honor. I promised to carry the torch and protect his legacy, even when the burden feels too heavy for one person to bear. Praying for my sister Eliana as she navigates her own struggles during this time. We all grieve in our own ways, even when it leads us down difficult paths. I scrolled down to the comments. They were flooded with heart emojis and praying hands. You are so strong. Vivian, thinking of you. So sad about Eliana. I heard she is having a hard time. You are a saint for supporting her. My stomach churned. She was painting me as the broken bird. The unstable sister who needed to be managed. It was a preemptive strike. If I fought her in court, she could point to this narrative and say, "See, I told you she was not well." My phone buzzed. It was a text from an old friend from high school, Sarah, who still lived in town. "Hey, Elle. Just saw Viv's post. Are you okay? I heard some people at the country club saying you're in financial trouble in Seattle. Something about gambling debt. That's crazy. Right?" I stared at the screen. Gambling debt. The lie was specific, ugly, and designed to do one thing: explain why I would want the inheritance money. It turned me from a grieving daughter into a desperate debtor. I did not reply. I closed the laptop. I drove to Tessa's office. I needed sanity. Tessa was buried under a pile of file folders. When I walked in, she held up a sheet of paper. "I found something," she said. I sat down. "Good news or bad news?" "Weird news," Tessa said. I was going through the estate inventory filed by Marrow and Vale. It is huge, obviously. Stocks, bonds, real estate, but I cross-referenced it with some tax filings from 3 years ago that I managed to pull from public record. And I asked, "And there is a discrepancy," she said. She pointed to a line on the spreadsheet. "There is a dormant account listed here. It has a balance of $5,000, tiny, for an estate this size. It is listed under a holding name, NPCF Holdings." "What is that?" I asked. I dug a little deeper. Tessa said, "NPCF stands for North Pine Community Foundation. The name from the sticky note." I said, "Right," Tessa said. "But here's the kicker. This foundation is not a normal charity. It has no website, no list of donors, no photos of smiling children. It is registered as a private foundation with a generic address in Delaware. But it is connected to the Morgan estate through this one tiny, dormant account. Why would my father have an account with a ghost foundation?" I asked. "I do not know," Tessa said. "But look at the transaction history. It is empty for 10 years. But right before that, monthly transfers, huge ones, $50,000, $100,000, going out of your father's main accounts and into this foundation, and then it stopped." I said, 10 years ago. Tessa said, "Roughly the same time your sister turned 23, the same time she started taking a more active role in the company." I felt a chill. The timeline matched the date on the redacted addendum. "It is a payoff," I said, "or a laundering scheme. It is something." Tessa agreed, but Marrow and Vale buried it in the inventory as a miscellaneous asset. They are hoping no one looks at a $5,000 account when there are millions elsewhere. "We need to know what North Pine is," I said. Tessa nodded. "I am working on it. But in the meantime, you have another problem, or an opportunity." "What?" I asked. "The lake house." She said, "Under the will, you have decision power over the Lake Bennett property for the next 12 months. Technically, that means you have the right to inspect it, secure it. Vivian thinks she owns it." I said, "Vivian is wrong," Tessa said. "Until the judge rules otherwise, that specific clause in the will stands. You are the temporary controller of that asset. And if your father was hiding things, Lake Bennett is the place he would do it. He spent his summers there. He had a private office there that no one was allowed to enter. I stood up. I am going to the lake. Be careful, Tessa warned. If Marrow and Vale find out, they will scream trespassing. Let them scream. I said, it is my house. The drive to Lake Bennett took an hour. The road wound through dense pine forests, the trees looming over the asphalt like sentinels. The lake itself was a deep, dark expanse of water, surrounded by vacation homes that sat empty for the season. The Morgan property was at the end of a private gravel lane. It was a sprawling cedar shingle cabin with a wraparound porch and a dock that stretched out into the black water. I pulled my car up to the gate. It was locked. I used the remote clicker my father had given me years ago. It didn't work. The code had been changed. I climbed out of the car and walked to the gate. A new padlock gleamed in the dim light. Heavy duty. I looked past the gate. The gravel driveway showed fresh tire tracks. Mud was churned up near the entrance. Someone had been here recently. Today. Maybe. I climbed over the gate. I didn't care about the mud ruining my pants. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching loudly under my boots. The house looked dark, but as I got closer, I saw something that made me stop. Above the front door, a small black dome was mounted on the porch ceiling, a security camera. But it wasn't pointed at the driveway or the yard. It was pointed at the door handle. It was pointed inward. It wasn't there to keep people out. It was there to see who was coming in. Specifically, I walked around to the side of the house, looking for another entry. The back porch faced the lake. The sliding glass doors were covered by heavy curtains. "Hey," a voice called out. I spun around. A man was walking up from the dock. He wore a gray work jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. He was carrying a toolbox. It was Rory Bennett. He had been the caretaker for the lake properties for as long as I could remember. He was in his 50s now, his face weathered by the wind, his eyes sharp and blue. "Rory," I said. He stopped a few feet away. He didn't smile. "Eliana," he said, "I heard you were back." "I am back," I said. "I tried to get in, but the gate code is changed." "Yeah," Rory said. He set the toolbox down. "Got orders last week? Change the codes. Change the locks. Orders from who?" I asked. "The firm," he said. "Those lawyers. Marrow and something. And your sister?" He looked at me, then looked up at the camera on the porch. "You should not be here." "Eliana," he said quietly. "They told me to call them if I saw your car. Said you were trespassing. Said you were not stable." I looked him in the eye. "Do I look unstable to you?" "Rory," he studied me. He looked at my muddy boots, my clenched fists, my steady gaze. He spat on the ground. "Away from me." "No," he said. "You look like your dad when he was fixing a problem." He reached into his pocket. "I don't like being used as a guard dog," he said. "And I don't like lawyers in suits telling me how to run my property lines." He pulled out a brass key. "This is the old master key," he said. "Opens the back service door. I was supposed to turn it in. Guess I forgot." He tossed it to me. I caught it. The metal was cold against my palm. "Thank you." "Rory," I said. He tipped his cap. "I didn't see you," he said. "And if that camera asks, I was down at the dock fixing the pump." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees. I went to the back service door. The key turned with a stiff click. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. The house smelled of stale air and pine. It was cold. The heating had been turned down low. I moved through the kitchen and the living room, keeping away from the windows. I made my way to my father's office at the back of the house. This room had always been his sanctuary. It was small, lined with bookshelves, with a view of the lake through a single window. I tried the door. Locked. I used the master key again. It worked. I stepped inside. The room was chaotic. Unlike the study in the main house, which had been sanitized, this room looked like it had been tossed. Papers were scattered on the floor. Books were pulled off the shelves. Vivian or her lawyers had been here. They had searched it. I felt a surge of panic. If there was anything here, they had found it. I knelt on the floor and started picking up papers. Old receipts, fishing logs, Nothing important. I sat back on my heels, looking around the room. My father was a man of habits. He liked secrets. He liked hiding places. When I was a child, we used to play hide and seek in this room. He had showed me a trick once. The house has bones. Eliana, he had said, and sometimes the bones have hollows. I looked at the baseboard near the heavy oak desk. It looked normal, but I remembered something, a loose piece of trim that he used to kick with his heel when he was thinking. I crawled under the desk. I ran my fingers along the bottom of the baseboard. There it was, a tiny, almost invisible latch mechanism hidden in the wood grain. I pressed it. A section of the baseboard, about 6 inches long, popped open on a spring. My heart hammered against my ribs. Inside the hollow space was a small velvet pouch. I pulled it out. Inside the pouch was a silver USB drive and a folded piece of yellow legal pad paper. I unfolded the paper. My father's handwriting was jagged. Rushed. Eliana, if you are reading this, I am gone. And if you are here, looking for this, it means Vivian has not followed the plan. Or maybe she has, and you are fighting her. I am sorry. I wanted to protect you from this. But I knew, deep down, that you were the only one who would ask the right questions. If Vivian fights you, it is because she knows what I did to keep us safe. She was part of it. She signed the papers. The drive has the proof. Use it only if you have to. Once this box is opened, it cannot be closed. I love you. Do not let them change who you are. Dad, I wiped a tear from my cheek. He knew. He knew it would come to this. I put the note in my pocket. I looked at the USB drive. I had brought my laptop in my bag. I sat on the floor, in the dark office, and plugged the drive in. A single folder appeared on the screen. Project North Pine, Risk Archive. I clicked it open. There were dozens of scanned PDFs. I opened the first one. It was a letter, dated 10 years ago, to Graham Morgan, from Silas Vane. Risk Counsel, Resettlement, Negotiation, and Asset Transfer Graham. The situation regarding the incident on September 14th has been contained, but the exposure remains critical. The opposing counsel is demanding a structured settlement that guarantees long-term silence. A lump sum is not sufficient. They require an oversight mechanism to ensure the family remains compliant with the non-disclosure terms. We propose utilizing the North Pine structure. It allows for the assets to be moved under the guise of charitable endowment, while actually functioning as a holding tank for the settlement funds. Vivian's signature will be required, as she is now the primary beneficiary of the trust segment involved. This will secure the family's reputation. But the cost is high. You are effectively mortgaging the company's liquidity to buy their silence. I opened another file. It was a bank transfer record. $5 million. Transferred from Morgan operating account to North Pine CF. I opened another. A legal agreement. Mutual release and confidentiality accord. The names of the other party were redacted in this version too. But the crime or the incident was hinted at, whereas the Morgan family acknowledges the events resulting in significant reputational and potential criminal liability, whereas the injured party agrees to forego criminal complaints in exchange for. It didn't say murder, it didn't say fraud, it said criminal liability. My father had paid $5 million and likely much more over the years to cover up a crime, and Vivian had signed the paperwork. She knew. She was part of the cover-up. That was why she needed the inheritance. That was why she needed control. If I got access to the books, if I saw the North Pine transfers, I would see the hole in the family fortune. I pulled the USB drive out. I put it in my bra, against my skin. I stood up to leave. As I walked out of the office and back into the living room, the lights flicked on. I froze. Vivian was sitting in the armchair by the fireplace. She was wearing a trench coat, wet from the rain. Marcus Thorne, her attorney from Marrow and Vale, stood by the door. "You found the key," Vivian said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I told Marcus that Rory was too sentimental to be useful. I stared at her. My hand went instinctively to my chest, where the drive was hidden. "What are you doing here?" "Vivian, I asked. This is my house. She said, not for the next 12 months. I said, I have the papers. Papers. Vivian scoffed. She stood up. Papers are just wood pulp and ink. Eliana, power is what matters, and you are playing a game you do not understand. She walked toward me. Did you find what you were looking for? She asked. I found an empty office. I lied. You cleaned this one out too. Vivian studied my face. She was looking for a tell. You are a bad liar. Eliana, you always have been. Your face gets red. She took a step closer. You are not allowed to touch what is not yours. She hissed. It is mine. I said, Dad left it to me. He left you a distraction. She said, he threw you a bone so you would feel important. But the meat of this family, the core of it, that belongs to me. Because I did the work. I made the sacrifices. You mean the silence. I said, I know about the agreement. Vivian, I know about North Pine. The room went deadly quiet. Marcus Thorne shifted by the door. His hand moved inside his jacket. Vivian's face didn't change, but her eyes went cold. Dead cold. You don't know anything, she said softly. You see words, but you don't know the weight of them. She leaned in, her perfume overpowering the smell of dust. You are going to lose, Eliana, not because you are wrong, but because you don't understand who is standing behind me. It is not just lawyers. It is not just money. You are tugging on a thread that is tied to a very heavy stone, and if you pull too hard, it is going to fall on your head. Is that a threat? I asked. It is advice, she said. Give me the key. Go back to Seattle. Forget North Pine. I gripped the key in my pocket. No. Vivian stared at me for a long second. Then she sighed, as if disappointed in a slow child. Have it your way, she said. She signaled to Thorne. We are leaving. Thorne opened the door for her. She walked out into the rain without looking back. I waited until I heard their car drive away before I ran to my own car. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove back to town like the devil was chasing me. I went straight to Tessa's office. I burst in. Tessa was on the phone. She looked pale. She hung up as soon as she saw me. Eliana, she said. Her voice was trembling. What? I asked. I pulled the USB drive out. I have it. I have the proof. Tessa didn't look at the drive. She looked at her phone. I just got a call. She said, From who? I asked. Block number. She said, It was a voice. A man's voice. Synthesized. Maybe. What did he say? He said, Tell Ms. Morgan to accept the settlement. We don't want the courthouse to become complicated. I felt the cold seep into my bones. Complicated. I repeated. Tessa looked at me. Eliana, she said, Who are we fighting? I looked down at the silver drive in my hand. I don't know, I said, but they are scared. And as the rain lashed against the window, I realized something else. I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry, and I was going to burn their secrets down, one by one. The anxiety did not hit me like a wave. It settled into my bones like a low-grade fever, constant and exhausting. For 3 days after the incident at the lake house, I barely slept. I lay in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the air conditioner and the occasional siren wailing in the distance. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Vivian's face in the dim light of the cabin, cold and imperious, telling me I did not understand the weight of the stone I was pulling. I was not afraid of the dark anymore. I was afraid of the silence. I kept the USB drive in the safe in my room, wrapped in a sock, hidden inside a shoe. It felt ridiculous, like spy fiction, but the memory of the security camera pointed inward at the lake house kept me from feeling foolish. They were watching. They were waiting for me to make a mistake, but I was not going to fold. It wasn't about the money. If Vivian had come to me on day one and said, Eliana, I need the inheritance to cover a debt, I would have signed it over. I had my life in Seattle. I had enough. This was different. This was about erasure. Vivian and Marrow and Vale were trying to scrub me out of the family history. to paint me as a mistake that needed to be paid off and sent away. My father had left me a key. He had left me a choice. To throw it away felt like agreeing with Vivian that I didn't matter. I spent my days at Tessa's office. It became my bunker. Tessa was fighting a war of paper. She had filed motions to compel the disclosure of the full, unredacted addendum and all records relating to the North Pine Community Foundation. The response from Marrow and Vale was immediate and overwhelming. They didn't just say no. They buried us in objections. "Look at this," Tessa said, slamming a thick stack of documents onto her desk. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and there were ink stains on her fingers. I picked up the top sheet. Objection to motion for disclosure. Grounds irrelevance. Attorney-client privilege. Protection of confidential fiduciary structures. Fiduciary structures, I read aloud. That sounds like a castle made of clouds. "It is legal speak for none of your business," Tessa said. "They are claiming that the North Pine Foundation is a third-party entity with no direct relevance to the probate estate, and therefore, its records are sealed. They are arguing that the addendum you found is an inadmissible draft of a private contract that was never executed, but it was executed." I said, "My father paid money. Vivian signed it. We know that," Tessa said. "But we have to prove it to a judge who plays golf with the senior partners at Marrow and Vale. They are delaying. Eliana, they are scheduling hearings 2 weeks out, then filing for continuances. They are trying to bleed you dry. Legal fees add up. They know you have a savings account, not a trust fund. Let them try." I said, "I will sell my car. I will take out a loan." Tessa looked at me with a mixture of worry and respect. "You really hate her, don't you?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, I don't hate her. I just refuse to let her be the only one who gets to define what is true. We need outside eyes," Tessa said. "I am a probate lawyer. I know wills. I know trusts. But this foundation structure, this money moving through shell accounts, this is forensic accounting. We need a specialist." She made a call. An hour later, I was sitting in a coffee shop on the edge of town, waiting for a man named Damon Shale. Damon did not look like an accountant. He looked like a retired boxer who had decided to teach math. He was broad-shouldered, wearing a wrinkled linen suit, and he ordered a black coffee and a bear claw pastry. He listened while I explained the North Pine connection, the dormant account, and the redacted addendum. I showed him the printouts Tessa had made of the few transfer records we had found. Damon chewed on his pastry slowly. He wiped crumbs from his chin with a napkin. "It is a reputation shield," he said. His voice was gravelly. "What does that mean?" I asked. "Rich families, the real elite ones, they do not solve problems with cash," Damon explained. "Cash leaves a trail. If you pay off a mistress, or a victim of a car accident, or a whistleblower, and you write a check from your personal account, that is a confession. It is admissible in court. It is public record. So they use a foundation." I said, "Exactly," Damon said. "They set up a charitable entity, or they use a sub-account of an existing one. They move the money in as a donation, tax-deductible, usually. Then the foundation, which is bound by its own charter, pays out a grant or a stipend or a consulting fee to the problem. The problem being the person they want to silence," I asked. "Right," Damon said. "The recipient signs a non-disclosure agreement with the foundation, not the family. So if anyone looks at the family's books, all they see is a generous donation to a good cause. It breaks the chain of causation. It is clean. Is it legal?" I asked. Damon shrugged. "It is gray. If the foundation is legitimate and the payout can be justified as charitable work, sure. If the foundation exists solely to launder hush money, that is fraud. That is tax evasion. That is piercing the corporate veil." He tapped the paper with the name North Pine on it. "But proving it is the hard part," he said. "These structures are designed to be opaque. Delaware registration, nominee directors. You need the internal ledger. You need to see the memo line on the check that went out, not just the money that went in. I have a ledger," I said, "or I think I do. On a drive." Damon's eyes sharpened. "If you have the payout ledger," he said, Then you have a smoking gun. But be careful. Ms. Morgan, people who build these shields pay a lot of money for them. They do not like it when someone cracks the glass. I left the coffee shop feeling both validated and exposed. Damon had given a name to the ghost reputation shield. My father had bought a shield to protect us. But protect us from what? The pressure started the next day. It wasn't subtle. I was at the hotel, getting ready to go to Tessa's office, when I got an email notification on my phone. It was from the Internal Revenue Service, a notice of audit for my tax returns from 3 years ago. I stared at the screen. My taxes were simple. I had one job. I took the standard deduction. There was nothing to audit. I called my accountant in Seattle. He was baffled. This is highly unusual. Eliana, he said, you are a low-risk filer. To get flagged for a random audit now, it is statistically bizarre. It is not random, I said. An hour later, my cell phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson, my landlord in Seattle. Eliana, he said. He sounded awkward. I just had a strange call. From who? I asked. A credit reporting agency, he said. Or they said they were. They were asking about your lease renewal. They wanted to know if you had ever missed a payment. They asked if there had been any complaints about noise or disturbances. Disturbances. I said, Mr. Henderson, I have lived there for 5 years. Have I ever made a noise louder than a sneeze? I know, he said hastily. I told them you were a model tenant, but the questions? They asked if you had ever had the police called on you. It was weird. Eliana, I just thought you should know. Thank you. Mr. Henderson, I said. I hung up. My hands were shaking. They were poking at my life. They were trying to find a loose thread, any thread, to pull on. They wanted to rattle me. I went to the grocery store to buy a sandwich for lunch. I was standing in the aisle, looking at bread, when I saw Sarah, my friend from high school. Sarah, I said. She jumped. She looked at me, then looked at her cart. Oh, hi, Eliana, she said. She didn't smile. She didn't ask how I was. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. How are you? I asked. I am good. She said, listen, I have to run. Frozen food. Melting. She started to push her cart away. Sarah, I said. She stopped. She turned back to me, and her face was pained. Look, Eliana, she whispered, I like you. But my husband works for a supplier that deals with Morgan Group. He was told it would be better if we didn't get involved in the drama. Involved. I said, Sarah, we are just talking in a grocery store. People are talking. Eliana, she said, they are saying you are going after the company. They are saying you are trying to ruin the pensions. Just leave me out of it. She hurried away. I stood there in the bread aisle, holding a loaf of sourdough, feeling like I had a contagious disease. Vivian didn't just own the money in this town. She owned the air. She could suck the oxygen out of a room from 5 miles away. I needed to talk to someone who remembered who I really was. I drove to the estate. I didn't call first. I knew Vivian would be at the office. My mother, Marilyn, was usually in the solarium at this time of day. She was a woman who had spent her life fading into the background, perfecting the art of being decorative and silent. I found her arranging hydrangeas in a crystal vase. She looked frail. Her hands were thin, the skin translucent. Mom, I said. She dropped a stem. She turned to me, her eyes wide. Eliana, she said. You should not be here, Vivian said. I don't care what Vivian said. I interrupted. I am your daughter. I walked over to her. I wanted to hug her, but her body language was so rigid it felt like hugging a fence post. Mom, they are auditing me. I said, they are calling my landlord. They are telling people I am unstable. Did you know about this? Marilyn looked down at the flowers. She picked up the fallen stem and tried to put it back in the vase, but her hand was shaking too much. Vivian is doing what is necessary, she said. Her voice was a whisper. Necessary? I asked. Destroying my reputation is necessary. Protecting the family is necessary, Marilyn said. She looked up at me, and her eyes were filled with tears. "Eliana, please, just stop. Stop the lawsuit. Take the settlement. Why do you have to be so stubborn? Because they are lying." "Mom," I shouted. I hadn't meant to shout, but the frustration boiled over. Dad left me that control for a reason. He wanted me to know. He wanted you to be safe, Marilyn said. She grabbed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. He thought if he gave you a little piece, you would be satisfied. He didn't think you would dig. Dig for what? I asked. What is North Pine? Mom, what happened 20 years ago? Marilyn flinched as if I had slapped her. She pulled her hand away and wrapped her arms around herself. We survived, she said. That is what matters. We survived. Who survived? I asked. All of us, she said. The company, the house, you. Vivian. She looked at the window, staring at the manicured lawn. Your father did what he had to do, she said softly. He was cornered. It was a mistake, a terrible, stupid mistake. But he fixed it. And Vivian, I asked. Marilyn closed her eyes. Vivian was there. She whispered. When it happened, she saw it. She was just a girl. Really, 23. But she stepped up. She signed the papers because I couldn't. I was too weak. What did she see? Mom, I pressed. Marilyn shook her head violently. Stop it, she cried. I can't talk about it. The agreement says we can't talk about it. If we talk, they take everything. Who takes everything? I asked. The police. No, Marilyn said. She looked at me with genuine terror. Not the police. The others. The ones who fixed it. She turned her back to me. Go. Eliana, please, before Vivian comes home, if she finds you here, she will be so angry. I looked at my mother's shaking shoulders. I realized then that she wasn't an accomplice. She was a hostage. She had been living in this beautiful prison for 20 years, terrified of saying the wrong word. I love you, Mom, I said. She didn't answer. I drove back to Tessa's office. I felt heavy, burdened by my mother's fear. But I also had a new piece of the puzzle. The ones who fixed it. Tessa was waiting for me. She was holding a document. Discovery is a beautiful thing, she said. Even when they try to hide everything, they slip up. What did you find? I asked. I was looking through the travel logs for the corporate jet. Tessa said, Marrow and Vale didn't redact them because they thought they were innocuous. Just flight paths. But look at this entry from 10 years ago. She pointed to a line. September 16th. Passenger Graham Morgan. Vivian Morgan. Destination Teterboro. New Jersey. So they went to New Jersey. I said, look at the reimbursement request attached to the trip, Tessa said. She flipped the page. Ground transport to Briarvale Trust Services. Suite 400. Briarvale. I repeated. I looked it up. Tessa said, it is not a bank. It is not a law firm. It is a private arbitration and risk management firm. Their website is just a login screen. But their address. It is in the same building as the registered agent for North Pine Community Foundation. They went there 2 days after the incident. I said, to make the deal. Exactly. Tessa said, it wasn't a court settlement. It was a private adjudication. They went to Briarvale. They admitted whatever they did, and Briarvale set up the structure to hide it. So who are we fighting? I asked. Marrow and Vale, or Briarvale, both, Tessa said grimly, and Briarvale sounds a lot more dangerous. 2 days later, we had the mediation. It was court-ordered. Before we could proceed to a full probate hearing, the judge required a good-faith attempt to resolve the dispute. The mediation was held in a conference room at a neutral law firm in the city center. The table was long and polished to a mirror shine. Vivian sat on one side, flanked by Marcus Thorne and another attorney I didn't recognize, a severe woman with gray hair and glasses. I sat on the other side with Tessa. Vivian looked relaxed. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that made her look like an angel. She had a bottle of sparkling water in front of her. Thorne began. We are here to save everyone time and embarrassment, he said. His voice was smooth, like oil. My client is prepared to increase her offer. He slid a paper across the table. $3 million, he said. Tax-free. Immediate transfer. I looked at the number. It was more money than I would earn in a lifetime of actuarial work. And in exchange, Tessa asked, complete renunciation of all claims. Thorne said, resignation from the temporary controllership of the lake property and the holding company, and a standard non-disclosure agreement regarding the terms of the settlement, and the destruction of any unauthorized copies of estate documents. The severe woman added. Her voice was sharp. She was looking directly at me. She knew about the addendum. I looked at Vivian. She was watching me with a faint smile. It was a pitying smile. Eliana, she said, please, be sensible. Look at yourself. You look tired. You look worn out. This fight is eating you alive. I am fine. Vivian. I said, are you? She asked. I heard about the audit. I heard your landlord is concerned. It is a lot of pressure, isn't it? Managing a life that is precarious. She took a sip of water. $3 million buys a lot of security. Eliana, you could buy a house, a real house, not an apartment. You could quit that job. You could find a husband who doesn't mind that you are intense. It was the tone, the way she said intense, the way she reduced my life to something pathetic that needed to be fixed with her money. She wasn't offering me a settlement. She was offering me an allowance. She was patting me on the head and telling me to go play while the adults talked. I felt the snap. It wasn't a loud crack. It was a quiet click in my chest. I sat up straight. I placed my hands flat on the table. No, I said. Thorne sighed. Ms. Morgan, this is a very generous offer. If we go to trial, you could end up with nothing. The legal fees alone, I don't care. I said. I looked at Vivian. I don't want your money. Viv, I don't want a house. I don't want to be safe. Then what do you want? She asked, her smile fading. I want to know why Dad was scared of you. I said. Vivian stiffened. He wasn't scared of me. She said cold. He respected me. He was terrified. I said, I saw it in his letters. I saw it in his eyes the last time I visited. He was trapped, and you were the jailer. I picked up the settlement offer. I tore it in half. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I don't want to manage your world, I said. I don't want the company. I don't want the prestige. I want transparency. I want to open the box. You are being a child. Vivian snapped. A selfish, destructive child. And you are a fraud. I said, you are walking around playing the grieving daughter, the pillar of the community. But your foundation is built on a graveyard. Thorne slammed his hand on the table. That is enough, he said. This mediation is over. We will see you in court. Vivian stood up. She leaned over the table. Her face was inches from mine. The angel mask was gone. Her eyes were hard and hateful. You are making a mistake. Eliana, she hissed. You think you are fighting for the truth? You are fighting for a suicide mission. When the truth comes out, it won't set you free. It will bury you. Let it, I said. I walked out of the conference room. My legs were shaking, but my head was clear. Tessa caught up with me in the hallway. That was intense, she said. You just turned down $3 million. I feel lighter, I said, and I meant it. We walked out of the building into the sunlight. It was a bright, crisp day. The rain had finally stopped. I checked my phone. I expected an angry text from my mother, or maybe another threat from the blocked number. Instead, there was a calendar notification. It was an invite. From an email address I didn't recognize. verificationprotonmail.com. I opened it. The location was a cafe on the outskirts of town. The Rusty Spoon. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. The title of the invite was simple. What your father couldn't say. I showed it to Tessa. Who is this? I asked. Tessa looked at the screen. She frowned. I don't know, she said. But whoever it is, they weren't in that mediation room, which means there is a third player on the board. Should I go? I asked. Tessa looked at the street, scanning for cars, for watchers. We go, she said. But we go carefully. Because if Vivian is scared of the truth, and this person is offering it, they are putting a target on their back. And yours? The Rusty Spoon was a diner that smelled of burnt coffee and bleach. Located on the frayed edge of Alderbrook, where the manicured lawns gave way to auto body shops and storage units, it was the kind of place where people went to be forgotten. Which made it the perfect place for a meeting that wasn't supposed to happen. Tessa had begged me not to go. She had paced around her office, listing the ways this could be a trap. It could be Marrow and Vale setting me up for a harassment suit. It could be a journalist looking for a scoop on the crazy Morgan sister. It could be dangerous. I went anyway, but I was not reckless. Tessa was sitting in her car 2 blocks away, her phone connected to mine on an open line. If I said the word pineapple, she was calling the police. I parked my Honda in the back lot. The rain had returned, a misty, annoying drizzle that clung to my coat. I walked around to the front entrance, my boots splashing in puddles that reflected the gray sky. Across the street, standing under the awning of a closed hardware store, was a man. He was wearing a black suit, not a cheap suit, like a security guard, but a tailored one that absorbed the light. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't waiting for a bus. He was watching the diner door. He didn't turn away when I looked at him. He just stood there, perfectly still, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. It wasn't the aggressive stance of a bouncer. It was the patient, terrifying stillness of a predator that knows the prey has nowhere to run. I shivered, and it wasn't from the cold. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The diner was mostly empty. A trucker was eating eggs at the counter. An elderly couple sat in a booth near the kitchen, and in the back corner, facing the door, sat a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He was thin, with graying hair that needed a trim. He wore a button-down shirt that was wrinkled at the elbows and a tie that had been loosened hours ago. He had a laptop bag on the seat next to him, clutching the strap as if someone might try to snatch it. I walked over to the booth. "Nolan Price?" I asked. He jumped. His eyes darted to the window, then back to me. "Sit down," he said. His voice was scratchy. "Keep your voice down." I sat. The vinyl seat was cracked and taped over with duct tape. "You sent me the invite," I said. "What your father couldn't say." Nolan picked up his coffee cup. His hand shook, creating ripples in the dark liquid. "I used to be the compliance officer for North Pine," he said, "for 6 years. Before that, I was an auditor for the state. I know numbers. Ms. Morgan, I know how to make them balance, and I know how to make them disappear. You worked for the foundation." I said. "I worked for the silence," he corrected. "North Pine isn't a foundation." "Not really. It is a filing cabinet with a checkbook." He leaned in. "Your father wasn't a bad man, Eliana. I want you to know that. He wasn't greedy. He wasn't cruel. Then why did he need a silence agreement?" I asked. "Because he was cornered," Nolan said. He looked out the window again, scanning the street. 20 years ago, there was a situation," he said. "The Morgan Group was expanding. They were leveraging heavy debt to acquire a competitor. The financials were fragile. If anything rocked the boat, the whole thing would have capsized. The company, the stock price, the employee pension fund, pensions," I said. 3,000 families depended on your father," Nolan said. "If the company went under, they lost everything. And then the incident happened." "What incident?" I asked. Nolan shook his head. "I can't tell you the specifics," he said. "Not here. The agreement has penalty clauses that would put me in federal prison. But I can tell you this. It involved a third party, someone who could have destroyed the company's reputation overnight. So Dad paid them off." I said. "He didn't just pay them," Nolan said. "He entered into a covenant. He agreed to a structure that would guarantee the payment forever, hidden from the shareholders, hidden from the board. That is what North Pine is. It is the spigot, and the recipient." I asked, "Who is on the other end?" Nolan pressed his lips together. "A group," he said. "A very powerful, very quiet legal entity that specializes in risk resolution. They offered your father a way out." They said, "We will make this problem vanish. But you have to sign this contract. You have to feed the foundation." I felt a sick feeling in my stomach. My father, the titan of industry, had been blackmailed. And Vivian, I asked, where does she fit in? Nolan looked at me with pity. The agreement required a successor. He said, "Your father was already in his 50s. The other party needed to know that the payments would continue after he died. They needed a guarantor." "Vivian," I whispered. "She was 18. Nolan said, "Just a kid." "Really?" "But she was the heir apparent. She was the one he was grooming. So he brought her into the room. He told her." I asked. "He had to." Nolan said, "She signed the papers. Eliana, she is a consenting party to the silence agreement. Her signature is right next to his on the founding documents of the Oversight Trust." I sat back. The breath knocked out of me. She signed it. At 18, that was why she was so cold. That was why she was so obsessed with control. She had been carrying a secret that could destroy her life since she was a teenager. She wasn't just protecting the money. She was protecting her own complicity. "She is trapped." I said, "We are all trapped." Nolan said. He rubbed his face. "But here's the thing. The agreement, it had conditions. It had rules about how the money was reported. And 3 years ago, when the market dipped, the estate got creative." "Creative how?" I asked. "They started moving assets that weren't supposed to be moved." Nolan said, "To cover the payments. They cooked the books. Ms. Morgan, I tried to warn them. I told Marrow and Vale that they were crossing the line from avoidance to fraud, and they fired you." I said, "They downsized me," Nolan said with a bitter laugh. "Gave me a severance package and told me to enjoy early retirement. But I kept a souvenir." He tapped his laptop bag. "There is a ledger," he said, "a shadow ledger. It tracks the real flow of funds. The money going into North Pine, the money going out to the beneficiaries. It contradicts every public filing the Morgan estate has made in 10 years. You have it." I asked. "I have a digital copy." Nolan said, "Give it to me." I said. Nolan pulled the bag closer. "I can't just give it to you," he said. "If I hand this over, I am breaking my NDA. I am exposing myself to lawsuits that will bankrupt my grandchildren. Then why are you here?" "Nolan, because I am tired of looking over my shoulder," he said, "and because I saw what they did to you in the press. Calling you unstable. That is their playbook. Discredit the witness. Isolate the threat." He looked at me, his eyes desperate. "I will testify," he said, "but only if I am subpoenaed. Only if I am legally compelled. If a judge orders me to speak. The NDA is void. I need protection. Eliana, I need you to force me to talk. I can do that." I said, "My lawyer can do that. Do it fast." Nolan said. He stood up. "Because they know I took the file. And the man across the street. He isn't waiting for a bus." Nolan walked out the back door of the diner without looking back. I waited 5 minutes. Then I walked out the front. The man in the black suit was gone. I drove back to Tessa's office with my heart hammering against my ribs. When I walked in, Tessa was on the phone, shouting, "I do not care what the filing says." She yelled. "It is baseless." She slammed the phone down. "What happened?" I asked. "Marrow and Vale just filed an emergency motion." Tessa said. She looked furious. "They are accusing you of witness tampering and intimidation." "What?" I said. "I haven't spoken to any witnesses, except Rory. They claim you have been harassing former employees of the estate," Tessa said. "They have a sworn affidavit from a gardener saying you threatened his job. They have a statement from the household staff saying you were aggressive during the funeral. They are making it up." I said. "Of course they are," Tessa said. "They are trying to box you in. They want a restraining order. They want to paint you as a loose cannon so that anything you bring to court looks like the ravings of a vengeful daughter." I sat down. I thought of Nolan's shaking hands. "I have a witness." "Tessa," I said, "a real one." "Who?" she asked. "Nolan Price." I said, "The former compliance officer for North Pine." Tessa froze. "You met him?" "I met him." I said, and he talked. He told me everything. The agreement, the payments, Vivian signing it when she was 18. Tessa's mouth dropped open. 18, she whispered. Jesus, that is why she is so terrified. She is legally liable. He has a ledger. I said, a shadow ledger. He says it proves fraud, but he won't give it to us unless we subpoena him. He needs legal cover to break his NDA. Tessa's eyes lit up. The anger vanished, replaced by the sharp focus of a hunter. He wants to be compelled. She said, that is brilliant. It gives him immunity. Can we do it? I asked. We can do better than that. Tessa said. She started typing furiously. We are not just going to subpoena him. We are going to file a motion for protective custody of a material witness. We are going to tell the judge that this man has evidence of felony fraud and that we have reason to believe his safety is at risk because of the man in the black suit. I said, because of everything. Tessa said, she hit print. This changes the game. Eliana, we aren't fighting a probate case anymore. We are fighting a RICO case. We are fighting a conspiracy. The next 48 hours were a blur of legal violence. Tessa filed the motion to compel Nolan's testimony. She attached a sealed affidavit summarizing what he had told me enough to get the judge's attention, but not enough to tip our hand fully to the other side. Marrow and Vale went nuclear. They filed 3 counter-motions in one day. They argued that Nolan was a disgruntled former employee with a history of mental health issues, a lie. They argued that his employment contract had an arbitration clause that barred him from testifying in civil court. They argued that I was manipulating him, but the judge, a stern woman named Judge Halloway, who had a reputation for hating delays, granted our motion. She ordered a deposition, and she ordered that Nolan Price be treated as a protected witness of the court. It was a victory, but it felt like the air before a thunderstorm. The pressure in Alderbrook was rising. I went to see my mother again. I had to know the rest of the truth. She was in the library this time, sitting in the dark with a glass of sherry. She looked smaller than ever, swallowed by the wingback chair. Mom, I said. She didn't look up. They say you are ruining us, she whispered. Vivian says you are going to put her in jail. I am not trying to put anyone in jail, I said. I am trying to stop the lies. I sat on the ottoman in front of her. Mom, I met Nolan Price. Marilyn's hand jerked, spilling sherry on her skirt. She didn't notice. Nolan, she breathed. Is he still alive? He is, I said. He told me about the agreement. He told me about the incident 20 years ago. Marilyn began to weep. It was a silent, horrible weeping, her chest heaving without sound. I didn't want to know. She sobbed. I told Graham, don't tell me. Just fix it. I just wanted it to go away. What was the incident? Mom, I asked gently, what was the relocation package? She looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. It was a family, she said, an employee. He found something out, about the merger, about the debt. He threatened to go to the press. And what happened to him? I asked. He had an accident. Marilyn whispered, a car accident. He wasn't hurt, but he was scared. And then, the men came. What men? I asked. The consultants, she said, from the firm. They told Graham they could handle it. They said they could make the employee happy. They said they could move him. Relocation. I said. They moved him to Europe, Marilyn said. They bought him a house. They gave him a stipend for life. That was the package. Millions of dollars. Eliana, just to keep him from talking about the debt. And the foundation pays for it. I said, yes, she said. The foundation pays the firm, and the firm pays the family. It is a circle, a terrible, expensive circle. She grabbed my hands, but it worked. Eliana, the company survived. The pensions were saved. Graham did it for the employees. He did it for us. He did it by committing fraud. Mom, and he dragged Vivian into it. She had to. Marilyn cried. She was the strong one. You were always so sensitive. We couldn't put that weight on you. I stared at her. Sensitive. That word again. They hadn't protected me because I was weak. They had excluded me because I had a conscience. Because they knew I wouldn't have signed. Dad gave me the key. I said, he gave me the control for 1 year. Because he was dying. Marilyn said, and he was tired. He knew Vivian would never stop the payments. She was too afraid. Maybe he thought you would be brave enough to break the circle. Or maybe he just wanted someone else to hold the bomb when it went off. I thought bitterly. I stood up. I am going to court. Mom, I said. Marilyn looked at me. For the first time, I didn't see fear in her eyes. I saw resignation. Then God help you, she said, because the men who fixed it, they are not lawyers. Eliana, they are something else. The day of the hearing arrived. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with unfallen rain. I dressed in my darkest suit. I pulled my hair back. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. The soft edges of the actuary from Seattle were gone. My face looked sharper, harder. Tessa picked me up. She was quiet. She had her game face on. Nolan is in the building, she said as we drove. The marshals brought him in the back way. Marrow and Vale tried to block his testimony again this morning, but the judge denied it. We are on. Are you ready? I asked. No, Tessa said honestly, but I am angry, and that is usually enough. We pulled up to the courthouse. The steps were crowded, not with reporters, this was probate. Usually boring, but with people. Employees of the Morgan Group, board members, friends of Vivian. They watched me as I walked up the stairs. Their faces were cold, judgmental. I was the traitor, the sister who wanted more money, the ungrateful daughter. Vivian had done her job well. She had turned the town against me. But I kept walking. We entered the courtroom. It was an old room, with high ceilings and heavy wood paneling. It smelled of floor wax and history. Vivian was already at the plaintiff's table. She looked immaculate, as always. But there was a tightness around her mouth, a tremor in her hands that she couldn't quite hide. Behind her, in the gallery, sat a row of men. There were 5 of them. They were all wearing dark suits. They were not looking at their phones. They were not talking to each other. They sat with perfect posture, their eyes fixed on the front of the room. I recognized the stillness. It was the same stillness as the man across the street from the diner. Who are they? I whispered to Tessa. Tessa glanced back. She stiffened. I don't know, she said. But they aren't from Marrow and Vale. They looked like sharks in human skin. They radiated a kind of professional menace that made the local lawyers look like children playing dress-up. This wasn't family court anymore. This was risk management. I took my seat. My hands were cold, but my mind was clear. I reached into my bag and touched the USB drive. I had the ledger. I had the witness. I had the truth. The bailiff stood up. All rise, he bellowed. The Honorable Judge Holloway presiding. I stood. Across the aisle. Vivian stood. She looked at me. Her eyes were pleading. Just for a second. Stop. She seemed to be saying, please stop. But it was too late to stop. The machine was in motion. I looked at the row of men in the back. One of them, the one in the center, met my gaze. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He just watched. I turned back to the judge. Let it burn. I thought. Judge Holloway took her seat. She adjusted her glasses and looked down at the packed courtroom. We are here for the matter of the estate of Graham Morgan, she said. I understand there are preliminary motions regarding the admissibility of a new witness. Tessa stood up. Yes, Your Honor. We call Nolan Price to the stand. The back door opened. A court-martial walked in, followed by Nolan. Nolan looked terrified. He was sweating. He kept his head down, but he walked to the stand. As he passed the row of men in suits, he faltered. He missed a step. The man in the center shifted slightly, just a subtle movement of his shoulder. Nolan froze. He looked at the man. He looked at the judge. I held my breath. Nolan took a deep breath, straightened his spine, and kept walking. He sat in the witness chair. State your name for the record. The clerk said, Nolan Price, he said. His voice was shaky, but audible. Tessa walked to the podium. Mr. Price, she said, you were employed by the North Pine Community Foundation. Is that correct? Yes, Nolan said. And during your employment, did you become aware of financial irregularities involving the Morgan estate? Objection, Marcus Thorne shouted. Jumping to his feet, calls for a conclusion of law. Violation of non-disclosure agreements. Overruled, Judge Holloway said sharply. The witness is under court protection. Answer the question. Mr. Price? Nolan looked at me. Yes, he said. I did. The room erupted in whispers. Vivian closed her eyes, and the trial began, not with a whimper, but with the sound of a 20-year-old wall beginning to crack. The courtroom did not smell like justice. It smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and the distinct, metallic scent of expensive cologne masking nervous sweat. By the third hour of the hearing, the air was so thick with tension it felt hard to breathe. Judge Holloway sat behind the high mahogany bench, her face unreadable. She was a woman known for her impatience with theatrics, but Marrow and Vale were not giving her theatrics. They were giving her a meticulously constructed alternate reality. Marcus Thorne stood at the podium, his posture relaxed, his voice filled with a sorrowful reluctance. He did not look like a shark. He looked like a concerned uncle. Your Honor, he said, we take no pleasure in these proceedings. My client, Vivian Morgan, loves her sister. This petition for emergency control was not filed out of malice. It was filed out of necessity. He turned to look at me. His eyes were kind, which made the knife he was twisting feel all the sharper. Ms. Eliana Morgan has spent the last decade living a transient, isolated life in Seattle. Thorne continued. She has no experience with complex financial instruments. She has no history of corporate governance, and, as the recent exhibits show, she has been under significant personal and financial stress. He held up a piece of paper. It was the audit notice I had received. The sudden interest Ms. Eliana Morgan has shown in the estate is not about legacy. Your Honor, Thorne said gently, it is about liquidity. She is desperate, and desperate people are prone to conspiracy thinking. They see shadows where there are none. They invent villains to justify their need to tear down what others have built. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands clenched in my lap. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout about the blacked-out addendum, the surveillance at the lake house, the man across the street from the diner, but I knew that was exactly what they wanted. An outburst would only prove their point. See? She is unstable. I looked at Tessa. She was writing furiously on her legal pad. She didn't look worried. She looked like a surgeon scrubbing in for a complicated operation. Let them talk, she had whispered to me earlier. Let them build the house of cards. Then we pull the bottom one out. Thorne finished his opening salvo by painting me as a tragic figure, a woman cracking under the pressure of grief, lashing out at her successful, stable older sister. It was a compelling story. If I didn't know who I was, I might have believed it. Tessa stood up. She didn't use the podium. She stood right next to our table, holding a single piece of paper. Your Honor, she said. Her voice was not sorrowful. It was crisp, cold, and sharp. Mr. Thorne tells a very moving story, but probate court is not a creative writing workshop. It is a place for facts, and the fact is, the executor of this estate has suppressed material evidence. She walked to the bench and handed the clerk the photocopy of the redacted addendum. We moved to introduce Exhibit D. Tessa said, a confidential addendum to the last will and testament of Graham Morgan, referenced in his personal correspondence but absent from the official filing. Thorne was on his feet instantly. Objection, he said. This document is a photocopy of a draft. It is unverified. It is inadmissible, and even if it were authentic, the content is privileged. Privileged by whom? Judge Holloway asked. She picked up the paper, squinting at the black bars. By the terms of the trust, Thorne said smoothly. And by third-party safety concerns. The room went quiet. Safety concerns, the judge repeated. In a probate case, Your Honor, Thorne said, lowering his voice to a grave register. The Morgan estate has dealings with sensitive entities. The confidentiality clauses are not standard non-disclosure agreements. They are structural safeguards. Breaching them could expose beneficiaries to external risks. He didn't say violence. He didn't say hitmen. But the implication hung in the air like smoke. Tessa didn't blink. External risks. Tessa repeated. That is an interesting phrase. Your Honor, it sounds less like estate planning and more like a protection racket. If the estate is hiding assets to pay for silence, the court needs to know. We request an order to unseal the original, unredacted document immediately. Judge Holloway looked at Thorne, then at Tessa. She placed the paper down. I will take the motion under advisement, she said. Proceed with testimony. Vivian took the stand after the lunch recess. She wore a navy blue dress with a high collar, modest and authoritative. She looked like the CEO she was, but softened by grief. She took the oath with a clear, steady voice. Thorne led her through the easy questions first. Her relationship with our father, her role in the company, her sacrifices. I gave up my 20s for the Morgan Group, Vivian said softly. While Eliana was finding herself in Seattle, I was in boardrooms. I was managing crises. I was making sure there was an inheritance to fight over. Daddy knew that. That is why he trusted me. And this North Pine Foundation? Thorne asked casually. The defense claims it is a vehicle for fraud. What is it? Really? Vivian smiled. It was a sad, forgiving smile. It is a private philanthropic initiative, she said. Daddy wanted to support causes that were personal to him without the fanfare of public donation. He was a humble man in that regard. North Pine supports retired employees. It supports medical research. It is completely standard. And the silence provisions? Thorne asked. Standard corporate confidentiality, Vivian said. We value the privacy of the people we help. Thorne sat down, looking satisfied. Tessa stood up. She didn't bring any papers with her to the lectern. She just leaned against it, looking at Vivian. Ms. Morgan, Tessa began. You say you were the one managing crises. You were the one in the room. Yes, Vivian said. So you were in the room 20 years ago, Tessa said. When the North Pine Foundation was created, Vivian blinked. A tiny, almost imperceptible hesitation. I was aware of it. Yes, she said. You were more than aware, Tessa said. You were 18 years old. You signed the incorporation papers. I signed many things, Vivian said dismissively. Daddy put papers in front of me, and I signed them. I trusted him. Tessa nodded. You trusted him. So when he created a dormant account that transferred $5 million out of the company operating fund and into a Delaware shell company, you trusted that too. It was not a shell company, Vivian snapped. It was a charitable trust. Tessa walked closer to the witness stand. We heard testimony yesterday from Mr. Price, the former compliance officer. Tessa said, he stated under oath that the Foundation's primary purpose was to facilitate a settlement agreement regarding a liability incident. Mr. Price is a disgruntled former employee who was fired for incompetence, Vivian said coldly. His word is meaningless. Is it? Tessa asked. Then let us look at the document. Tessa picked up the redacted addendum from the clerk's desk. She held it up so Vivian could see it. This is the document Eliana received, Tessa said. As you can see, almost everything is blacked out. The only legible words are confidential addendum and silence provisions. Vivian looked at the paper with disdain. Ms. Morgan, Tessa said, why are there silence provisions in a will? There aren't, Vivian said. That document is a draft of a separate business agreement. It has nothing to do with the will. Then why was it in your father's personal estate file? Tessa asked. And why does it reference the beneficiary oversight structure? Vivian rolled her eyes. Because the oversight structure is part of the estate planning, she said, her voice rising in irritation. It ensures that the funds allocated for the relocation protocol are not misused. The courtroom froze. I saw Tessa's back stiffen. I saw Judge Holloway's head snap up. I looked at Vivian. She had frozen too. Her mouth was slightly open, as if she was trying to pull the words back into her throat. Relocation protocol. Tessa repeated softly. She looked at the redacted page in her hand. Then she looked back at Vivian. Ms. Morgan. Tessa said, I am looking at this document. I am looking at the black bars. Nowhere in the legible text does it say relocation protocol. Vivian's face went pale. The perfect mask of the grieving, responsible daughter cracked. It is standard terminology, she stammered. For that type of trust. Standard terminology, Tessa said. So you are admitting you know what is under the black bars. I have seen drafts, Vivian said. I assume that is what it refers to. You assume? Tessa pressed. Or you know. Because if you know that this document funds a relocation protocol, then you are admitting that the foundation is paying to move someone. Who are you moving? Ms. Morgan? And why are you paying them to be silent? Objection, Thorne shouted. He was practically vaulting over the table, badgering the witness, mischaracterizing testimony. Judge Holloway slammed her gavel down. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Overruled. She barked. She turned her gaze on Vivian. Ms. Morgan, the judge said. Her voice was dangerously quiet. You just testified that this document was irrelevant. Now you are referencing specific clauses within it that are not visible to this court. I misspoke, Vivian said. Her hands were gripping the railing of the witness stand so hard, her knuckles were white. I was confused. You do not look confused, Judge Holloway said. You look like someone who knows exactly what is in the sealed materials. The judge looked at Thorne. Counsel, I am not going to play games with discovery in my courtroom. If your client is testifying about the contents of a sealed document, she has waived the privilege, Your Honor. Thorne pleaded, sweat visible on his forehead. The safety concerns are noted. The judge cut him off. We are taking a recess. 30 minutes. I want both counsel in my chambers. And Mr. Thorne, if I find out you have been sitting on a material document that contradicts your filings, I will sanction your firm into the Stone Age. All rise. The gavel banged again. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My hands were shaking. Tessa turned to me. She was grinning. A fierce, predatory grin. She slipped. Tessa whispered. She walked right into it. Relocation protocol. She just confirmed the payoff. Vivian was being ushered out of the courtroom by her legal team. She looked furious. She shot a glance at me over her shoulder, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. I walked out into the hallway. The air was cooler there. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my heart rate. It was working. We were winning. But the victory felt fragile. Vivian wasn't just fighting a legal battle. She was fighting for her life, and cornered animals bite. I thought about what my mother had said. The men who fixed it are not lawyers. I looked around the hallway. It was crowded with people murmuring, checking their phones. I saw the man from the back of the courtroom, the one who had stared at Nolan. He was standing near the water fountain. He wasn't drinking. He was just standing there, watching the door to the judge's chambers. He turned his head slowly and looked at me. A chill went down my spine. He didn't look worried about the judge's ruling. He looked like he was waiting for a different signal. Tessa came bursting out of the courtroom doors. She looked flustered, which was unlike her. She was holding her phone. Eliana, she said, come here. She pulled me into a quiet alcove near the restrooms. What is it? I asked. Did the judge unseal the document? Not yet, Tessa said. But something weird just happened. I just got a notification from the court clerk system. A notification for what? I asked. A witness list update. Tessa said. Who is adding a witness? I asked. Marrow and Vale. No, Tessa said. She showed me the screen. The filing party wasn't listed as plaintiff or defendant. It was listed as intervener. Interested third party. The screen read, Motion to appear granted. Who is the third party? I asked. The name is sealed, Tessa said. But look at the credentials code. She pointed to a string of numbers next to the filing. That is not a local bar number, Tessa said. That is a federal agency code, or something close to it. Federal. I said, like the FBI. I don't know, Tessa said, but whoever it is, they just big-footed Judge Holloway. She granted the appearance instantly. That never happens. The bailiff stuck his head out of the courtroom. "Counsel," he called out, "we are back on the record." We walked back in. The atmosphere had changed. The buzz of the crowd was gone, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. Vivian was back at her table. She looked pale. Thorne was whispering urgently in her ear, but she wasn't listening. She was staring at the double doors at the back of the room. Her jaw was tight, the muscles working. Her eyes flicked to the door, then away, then back again. She knows. I realized. She knows who is coming. Judge Holloway took the bench. She looked rattled. She shuffled her papers, clearing her throat. "We are back on the record," the judge said. "Before we address the matter of the sealed addendum, the court acknowledges the presence of an intervener with standing in regard to the assets of North Pine Community Foundation." Thorne stood up. "Your Honor, we object to any surprise testimony." "Sit down." "Mr. Thorne," the judge said. She didn't even look at him. "This is not a request." Thorne sat down slowly. He looked at Vivian. Vivian didn't move. She looked like a statue made of ice that was about to shatter. The judge nodded to the bailiff. "Admit the witness." My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at the heavy wooden doors at the back of the room. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the latch clicked. It was a loud mechanical sound in the silent room. The door swung open. A man walked in. He was not one of the sharks from the gallery. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and a stride that ate up the space between the door and the bar. He wore a black suit, tailored and expensive, but he didn't wear it like a lawyer. He wore it like a uniform. He carried a slim leather folder in one hand. He walked past the gallery. He walked past the rows of stunned spectators. He walked past me. As he passed, I caught a scent of clean soap and something sharp, like gun oil. He stopped at the gate that separated the gallery from the well of the court. He didn't ask for permission to enter. He just pushed the swinging gate open and walked to the center of the room. He stopped in front of the bench. He didn't look at Tessa. He didn't look at Thorne. He looked briefly at Vivian, a flat, unreadable glance that made her flinch as if he had raised a hand. Then he looked up at the judge. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. He flipped it open. A gold badge caught the light. It wasn't a police badge. It was something more intricate, with an eagle and a scale. "Gideon Cross," the man said. His voice was deep, calm, and carried to every corner of the room without shouting. "Who are you representing, Mr. Cross?" Judge Holloway asked. Though she sounded like she already knew. "I am appearing as special counsel for the Fiduciary Oversight Board," Gideon Cross said. He placed the slim folder on the judge's bench. "I am here to take possession of the evidence regarding the North Pine Community Foundation," he said, "and to correct the record regarding the death of Graham Morgan." The courtroom erupted. Thorne was shouting. The gallery was buzzing. I sat frozen in my chair. Fiduciary Oversight Board. It sounded boring. It sounded bureaucratic. But the way Vivian Morgan had slumped in her chair, putting her face in her hands, told me the truth. This wasn't a bureaucrat. This was the man who burned systems down. And he had just lit a match. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence of a vacuum, as if all the air had been sucked out by the man standing before the bench. Gideon Cross did not look at the gallery. He did not look at the frantic whispering occurring at the plaintiff's table, where Marcus Thorne was trying to grab Vivian's arm. Gideon looked only at Judge Holloway, his expression as flat and hard as a tombstone. "Your Honor," Gideon said. His voice was a deep baritone that vibrated against the wood paneling. "I represent the Fiduciary Oversight Board, an independent compliance body attached to the charter of the North Pine Community Foundation." Judge Holloway peered over her glasses. "I am not familiar with that body, Mr. Cross," she said, "and I am not in the habit of allowing surprise interveners in probate matters." "This is not a standard probate matter," Gideon replied. He placed the leather folder on the ledge of the witness stand, though he remained standing. "The assets in dispute, specifically the holdings within the North Pine structure, are subject to federal banking regulations regarding high-risk instruments. My clients have reason to believe that the current executor, Ms. Vivian Morgan, has misrepresented the nature of these assets to this court. Misrepresented. The judge repeated, "That is a polite word for fraud. We prefer the term structural noncompliance," Gideon said. "But the effect is the same." Thorne jumped to his feet. "Objection," he shouted. "This is an ambush. We have no knowledge of this man or his authority. This is a tactic by the defense to sit down." "Mr. Thorne," Gideon said. He didn't shout. He didn't even turn his head. He just issued the command with such terrifying, absolute authority that Thorne's mouth snapped shut. The lawyer looked at the man in the black suit, then sank slowly back into his chair. Gideon turned back to the judge. "I have 3 documents to submit for the court's review," he said. "First, a chain of custody statement proving that the estate inventory filed by Marrow and Vale is incomplete. Second, a summary of the internal ledger from North Pine, authorized for release by the Compliance Office due to the breach of protocol by the executor. And the third?" the judge asked. Gideon reached into the folder. He pulled out a document that looked identical to the one I had found in the envelope, except there were no black bars. The unredacted addendum to the settlement agreement of 2006. Gideon said, "Authenticated by the original signatories." He handed the papers to the bailiff, who walked them to the bench. Vivian let out a sound. It was a low, strangled gasp. She was staring at the document in the bailiff's hand as if it were a poisonous snake. Judge Holloway put on her reading glasses. She picked up the addendum. The room waited. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I could hear the heavy breathing of the man next to me. The judge read the first page. Then she flipped to the second. Her eyebrows went up. She flipped to the third. She stopped. She looked up at Vivian. The look was not angry anymore. It was horrified. "Ms. Morgan," the judge said quietly, "did you sign this document on September 14th, 2006? Vivian didn't answer. She was gripping the table, her knuckles white. "Ms. Morgan," the judge repeated, sharper this time. "I signed it," Vivian whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "I signed it to save the company." Judge Holloway turned to Gideon. "Mr. Cross," she said, "explain this to the court." Gideon turned to face the room. For the first time, he looked at me. His eyes were dark, devoid of empathy, but they held a strange kind of respect. 20 years ago, the Morgan Group faced a catastrophic liability event. Gideon stated, "An employee discovered that the company was leveraging pension funds to cover high-risk debt obligations. This employee threatened to expose the insolvency. I felt a chill. It was exactly what Nolan had said, but hearing it here, in the cold light of the courtroom, made it real, to prevent a collapse that would have ruined 3,000 families. Graham Morgan entered into a private agreement. Gideon continued. He utilized the services of a risk management firm to facilitate a relocation protocol. The whistleblower and his family were moved to Europe and provided with a lifetime stipend in exchange for absolute silence. And North Pine? The judge asked. North Pine is the payment vehicle, Gideon said. It was established as a charitable foundation to obscure the flow of funds. The monthly transfers are categorized as philanthropic grants, but they are, in fact, hush money. The gallery erupted. Reporters were typing furiously on their phones. Board members were gasping. Gideon raised a hand, and the room quieted again. However, he said, the agreement required a guarantor, someone who would ensure the payments continued after Graham Morgan's death or incapacitation. He pointed a long finger at Vivian. Vivian Morgan was that guarantor. Gideon said, she was 18 years old. She signed the agreement as a consenting beneficiary. And here's the part that concerns the Oversight Board. Gideon said, his voice dropping an octave. The agreement contains a reciprocity clause, in exchange for managing the silence. Vivian Morgan was granted a protected income stream from the foundation itself. I stared at him. Protected income stream. I thought. Gideon looked at the ledger summary. According to these records, Vivian Morgan has received $50,000 a month from North Pine for the last 10 years, listed as administrative consulting fees. This income was never disclosed in her personal financial filings, nor was it disclosed to the probate court as part of her assets. I felt the blood drain from my face. She wasn't just hiding the crime. She was profiting from it. She was getting paid to be the jailer. And when Eliana Morgan was named as a potential decision-maker for the holding company, Gideon continued, Vivian Morgan attempted to seize emergency control of the estate, not because Eliana Morgan was incompetent, but because if Eliana gained access to the decision trigger clause, she would have the legal right to audit North Pine. She was trying to stop the audit, Gideon said. She was trying to protect her own liability. He turned back to the judge. This is a conflict of interest of the highest order. Your Honor, the executor is financially incentivized to suppress the truth about the estate's debts. Judge Holloway looked at Vivian. Is this true? She asked. Vivian stood up. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She didn't look like a grieving sister. She looked like a cornered animal that had decided to bite. It was necessary, she said. Her voice was shaking, but it was loud. Necessary, the judge asked, to defraud the court, to save the family. Vivian shouted. She stepped out from behind the table. Thorne tried to grab her, but she shook him off. You sit there in your robes and judge me. She spat. You don't know what it was like. I was 18. Daddy came to me and said, Vivi, everything is going to end. The house, the cars, the employees, everything. He was crying. My father never cried. He begged me to help him. She pointed at me. Eliana was 12, she screamed. She was playing with dolls. I was the one who had to grow up. I sat in that room with the lawyers and the men in suits. I signed the papers because Daddy couldn't do it alone. I saved his legacy. And the money, the judge asked coldly. The $50,000 a month. It was compensation, Vivian yelled. For the risk. For the burden. Do you know what it is like to wake up every day knowing one phone call could destroy your life? I carried that weight. I earned that money. I kept the lights on. I kept Eliana in private school. I kept the wolves away. She turned to me. Her eyes were wild. You think you are so holy, she said. You think you are the hero because you found a piece of paper. You are a child. Eliana, you want the world to be clean. You want it to be fair. But the world is built on ugly bargains. Your trust fund, your college tuition, your nice safe life in Seattle. It was all paid for by that silence. I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't feel the need to shout. The anger that had been burning in me for weeks had cooled into something hard and solid, like steel. I didn't ask for it. Vivian, I said. You took it, she screamed. You spent it. And now you want to burn it down because you feel left out, because Daddy didn't trust you with the secret. He didn't trust me to keep it. I said quietly. He trusted me to end it. Vivian laughed. It was a harsh, jagged sound. He used you. You idiot, she said. He didn't love you more. He was a coward. He couldn't face the music while he was alive. So he set a timer on a bomb and handed it to you. He knew you were too self-righteous to leave it alone. He sacrificed us both. Her words hit me like a physical blow. He sacrificed us both. I looked at the unredacted addendum on the judge's bench. I thought about the key in the lake house, the letter. If Vivian fights you, it is because she knows. She was right. My father hadn't been a hero. He hadn't even been a good father. He had been a desperate man who built a prison for his eldest daughter and a detonator for his youngest. He had pitted us against each other to clear his own conscience from the grave. But knowing that didn't change what I had to do. It stops today. I said. Vivian glared at me. Then you are a fool, she said. Judge Holloway banged the gavel. That is enough, she said. The room fell silent. The court has heard enough, Judge Holloway said. She looked down at her notes, her face grim. Based on the evidence presented by the Fiduciary Oversight Board and the admission of the executor, the court finds that there has been a material breach of fiduciary duty. She looked at Vivian. Vivian Morgan is hereby removed as executor of the Graham Morgan estate, effective immediately. Her petition for emergency control is denied with prejudice. Vivian slumped back into her chair. Thorne put his head in his hands. Furthermore, The judge continued. The court orders an immediate freeze of all assets related to the North Pine Community Foundation and the personal accounts of Vivian Morgan. Pending a full forensic audit, she turned to Gideon. Mr. Cross, the court accepts your documents into the record. The unredacted addendum is hereby unsealed. The public has a right to know the nature of this estate. Gideon nodded once. Thank you, Your Honor. And as for you, Ms. Eliana Morgan, the judge said, looking at me. I stood up straighter. The court recognizes the validity of the specific bequest regarding the holding company. You are granted full decision-making power over the Moore Corp shares and the Lake Bennett property. As intended by the deceased, I had won. But as the gavel came down with a final crack, I didn't feel like celebrating. I looked at Vivian. She was staring at the table, her face blank, her life dismantling around her in real time. Court is adjourned. The room broke into chaos. Reporters shouted questions. The men in the gallery stood up and filed out, talking into their phones. Tessa grabbed my arm. We did it. She said, her eyes were wide. Eliana, we actually did it. We beat them. I nodded. Yes, we did. I looked for Gideon Cross. He was standing by the gate, waiting for the crowd to clear. He wasn't celebrating either. He looked like a man who had just finished a shift at a slaughterhouse efficient, but aware of the blood. I walked over to him. Mr. Cross, I said. He looked down at me. Up close, his eyes were even colder. Ms. Morgan, he said. Thank you, I said, for the documents. Don't thank me, he said. I didn't do it for you. I did it because your sister broke the rules. The silence only works if everyone holds the line. She got greedy. She got sloppy. She had to be corrected. Corrected. I repeated. She is my sister, not an accounting error, to my clients. She is a liability, Gideon said. And now, so are you. What does that mean? I asked. He leaned in slightly. The judge unsealed the addendum. He said, that means the name of the whistleblower is public record now. The press will find them. The story will come out. The Morgan Group stock will tank. The pensions might survive, or they might not. He adjusted his cuffs, but the people who built that structure, the ones who moved the whistleblower, they don't like exposure. You won today, Eliana, but you just turned on a very bright light in a very dark room. Don't expect the roaches to just scatter. They bite. He handed me a card. It had no name, just a number. If you see a black car parked outside your house, he said, call this number. We protect the asset, and for now, you are the asset. He turned and walked out of the courtroom, slicing through the crowd like a knife through water. I stood there, holding the card. The victory tasted like ash. Eliana. I turned. Vivian was standing there. Thorne was gone. The entourage was gone. It was just her. She looked 10 years older than she had this morning. Her posture was still perfect, but her eyes were dead. Are you happy? She asked. No, I said. I am not happy. Viv, I just wanted the truth. The truth. She scoffed. She looked around the empty courtroom. You think this is the truth? This is just a mess. You destroyed everything Daddy built. You destroyed my life. And for what? So you could feel important. So I could feel clean. I said. Vivian shook her head. There is no such thing as clean. Eliana. Not with money like ours. You are just as dirty as the rest of us now. You just haven't realized it yet. She walked past me toward the door. She stopped with her hand on the latch. She looked back at me. Her expression softened. Just for a fraction of a second. It wasn't love. It was a terrible, tragic pity. You won the inheritance, she said, but you lost the family. I hope it was worth it. She pushed the door open and walked out. I was left alone in the courtroom. The silence returned. I walked to the window and looked out. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, revealing a sliver of pale, cold blue sky. I saw Vivian walking down the courthouse steps. A wall of reporters surged toward her, microphones thrust in her face. She didn't stop. She didn't speak. She put on huge dark sunglasses and kept walking, her head high, marching toward her car. I looked at the card in my hand. I looked at the unredacted addendum sitting on the judge's bench. My father had left me a choice: take the money and safety, or burn the entire system down. I had struck the match. I had dropped it. The system was burning. The lies were burning. And standing there, watching the smoke rise, I realized that Vivian was right about one thing. I wasn't the quiet sister anymore. I wasn't the second daughter. I was the one who survived the fire. I walked out of the courtroom, past the empty benches, past the ghosts of the lawyers and the liars. I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped out into the cool air. Tessa was waiting for me at the bottom of the steps. She smiled. "Ready to go?" she asked. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and wet pavement. It smelled real. "Yes," I said. "I am ready." I walked down the steps to meet her. I didn't look back at the courthouse. I didn't look at the reporters. I looked at the horizon, where the sun was finally, painfully, breaking through. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was mine. Thank you so much for listening to My Wealthy Sister Demanded My Inheritance in Court. Then a man in a black suit walked in and... I hope you felt the tension of Eliana's journey as much as I did writing it. It is a story about the heavy price of truth and the complicated bonds of family. I would love to know, where are you listening from today? Please drop your country or city in the comments below. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story and want more intense dramas about justice, betrayal, and family secrets, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. And finally, what did you think of Eliana's choice? Did she do the right thing by exposing the family secret? Or was Vivian right that some lies are necessary to protect the ones we love? Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read them all.